Tonight on Greater Boston, as most of the nation mourns the overturning of Roe v. Wade, many abortion opponents, including Amy Coney Barrett, say they have a solution: adoption. Ahead, two leading voices join me on why she's wrong. Plus, as inflation doubles down on food insecurity, already exacerbated by the pandemic, I'm joined by two people who are part of bringing millions of healthy meals to kids and are doing even more this summer. And finally, you'd think the so-called Bay State would be a beach lover's paradise for all, but as we found out, access to the shore is very much not equal. While we pretty much knew the future of abortion rights since the decision first leaked almost 2 months ago, the writing was on the wall even earlier when Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett asked this question during oral argument in December.
Both Roe and Casey emphasized the burdens of parenting. And insofar as you and many of your amici focus on the ways in which the forced parenting, forced motherhood would hinder women's access to the workplace and to equal opportunities, it's also focused on the consequences of parenting and the obligations of motherhood that flow from pregnancy. Why don't the safe haven laws take care of that problem?
Why indeed? Just drop the newborn off at your nearest fire station. Someone will adopt them, say anti-abortion activists like these people whose photo on Twitter went viral with their sign, "We will adopt your baby." Unsurprisingly, a wave of memes mocking them quickly followed, like this one featuring the McCloskey couple of Black Lives Matter protest response, and this one of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, aimed at pointing out the absurdity of the declaration. Joined by Adam Pertman, he's president, CEO, and founder of the National Center on Adoption and Permanency. Aimee Seiff Christian, who's written about her own experience with adoption, teaches a writing workshop for fellow adoptees, and I should say both of my daughters are adopted as well. Amy and Adam, it's good to have you. Thanks so much for being here.
So, thanks for doing this segment.
Adam, starting with you, according to Coney Barrett, it's a piece of cake. You bring a child to term, put them up for adoption, everybody's happy. Is she on to something?
Yeah, sure. Women are just baby carriers for people who have $50,000 to spend, right? It's outrageous. I mean, the whole notion, safe havens are controversial in and of themselves. So legal places where you can abandon your child. But whatever one thinks of them, and I'm not a fan, the notion of someone from on high, a Supreme Court justice, suggesting that women abandon their babies. Just step back and think about it. It is revolting and awesome. And I think, if I may, just one other quick thing that I made a note to myself. She and Alito also talked about increasing the supply of babies, which makes it crystal clear what they're talking about. It's a marketplace in which the people who have money will get what they want and everybody else can suffer from trauma.
So, Amy, let's go from the high level, as Adam mentioned, the Supreme Court, to the ground level. You're an adoptee yourself. What did you think of Coney Barrett? And she's not alone by a long shot. What did you think of her assertion?
Thank you for having me first. And sure. We all think that it's very clear that they've turned us into a commodity, right? We're not actually considered humans. We're not even considered babies, but a commodity. It's very clear that this is not about, it's not about babies. It's about increasing the supply and demand of a thing. It's a business.
Well, I'm not even sure it's about increasing the supply. It's pretty much trying to justify an end, and they'll do anything they can to get to the end game. You know, Amy's staying with you. What it appears to me, so obviously she's missing, is the question of choice and what comes with the absence of choice. What does come with the absence of choice, Amy?
Tragedy and trauma. You mentioned the word trauma, and that's what's come to me. You know, many people when I was growing up asked me a rhetorical question, aren't you glad you weren't aborted?
Sure,
and there's just no, it's a ridiculous question. And it was a ridiculous answer, because if people had asked me that, there's no other answer. Right? How could I say anything but yes, of course. But the truth is, I had wished, and I still wish, that my mother had been given the ability to make the decision for herself. No one made that decision for her, but her own mother. Her mother made the decision for her. My mother had also been adopted. And so the decision for her was, well, you were adopted, so this is what we're doing for you. The end of story. She never had a choice. And now my daughters will not have a choice.
Did you reconnect, if I understand? You reconnected with your birth mother, Aimee, did you not?
I did. And the
What-
first thing she said to me was, I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me? Now that you have had babies of your own, can you understand how difficult it was for me to give you away? I never wanted to.
You know, Adam, a local line that I attribute to a former congressman, and I won't mention his name because I'm not sure I'm right, but I'm sure the comment is, those who take this position believe birth begins at conception and ends at birth. I mean, life begins at conception, ends at birth. What's the resource situation now without this extra burden, or to use the word that you both have used, the supply increases? What's the resource situation for adoptions, for foster care in this country?
How do you mean resource?
I mean, what's available? Do we have enough people? Do we have enough money to facilitate adoptions, putting kids in foster care, taking them out of foster care for what we currently have?
So let me make a couple points. First, I just want to follow up on Aimee for a second and say that one of the travesties of this is not just about choice at the moment. I get a choice and I want something to happen that's my decision making. That's not it. When women place kids for adoption, I ask your whole audience, any woman who has given birth, you could just part with that baby and forget about it, right? And move on with your life. You would grieve the rest of your life. What this does, what Coney Barrett's construct does, is relegate a generation of women to seeing a shrink for the rest of their life. It is traumatic. It is lifelong. It is heartless to treat women as though they can do that, because they cannot. And the research is clear about that. The experience is clear about that. There are no questions about this, except and the comments were ignorant with a small I, uninformed, skewed, but ignorant nevertheless. So to answer your question, there are tens of thousands of children in foster care who if people want to adopt, they can adopt them. They're not babies. And that's why these are separate populations, okay? The babies that are available typically, almost overwhelmingly, are available for adoption by people of means because they need $30,000 to $60,000. So it's not for everybody. The foster care population, there are no charges, and these babies are not going to go into foster care. These babies are going to go into an industry, if you will, where profits are permitted.
So this may be unfair, Aimee, to ask you to go into the mind reading business, but Amy Coney Barrett is not a dope. I mean, she's an incredibly smart woman from my limited observation during her confirmation hearing. Is this, the term willful ignorance has been used a lot this past week during the January 6th hearings about Donald Trump's contention that he actually believes he won the election. Is this willful ignorance? Is it cruelty? What do you attribute this blithe notion? You have the kid, you give up the kid, everybody's happy. What do you attribute it to?
I think she's an adoptive parent. She's a conservative Christian, and I think there's some cognitive dissonance in there. And I also think that this has to do with creating. We've talked about supply. I honestly think that there's a decision here to create more white babies in the United States.
Well, even though the bottom line is a disproportionate number of people who are going to be forced to give birth to a child they believe they can't take care of or don't want, are probably people of color too. And what happens, Adam, all three of us obviously on the same page here. Doesn't matter where we are. The Supreme Court has made a determination. More than half the states have already made a determination. What does happen to the system? What happens to these kids when the numbers do go up exponentially, which by definition they're going to do? What happens to those kids?
First, I'm not sure that it's going to be exponential because we still don't know what's going to happen with abortion pills and, you know.
Well, let me interrupt you. There is no question, abortion pills or not, the numbers are going to go up.
Well, the numbers are going to go up.
Okay, so what happens?
We don't know by how much.
What happens to those kids?
More babies are going to be available for adoption. More birth mothers are going to be grieving for the rest of their lives because they didn't have any choice. And anyway, more birth mothers are going to be grieving. And in the longer term, because of the nature of the children who are going to be born, there's going to be an increase longer term, because this will take time. There will be an increase in kids in foster care who are displaced from their families for reasons of abuse, neglect, because by definition, if these women had resources, they wouldn't place their kids. They'd get a babysitter, they'd get daycare. But instead, they're going to be forced to either grieve for the rest of their lives because they placed their kid, or raise their kids without the resources needed to do it, and life is going to be really tough, and more kids, we are going to fuel foster care.
You know, Aimee, before we go, I don't want to leave people with the misconception, at least speaking for myself, that adoption, if it's by choice, is anything but a wonderful thing. I am firsthand knowledge. We're talking about a situation where there is no choice, where it is believed to be a substitute or replacement for abortion. Is that not where we are, Aimee?
I can't say anymore that I'm pro-adoption, but I have seen adoption go well. I do agree with Adam that the birth mother grieves. I just see that the birth mother grieves, and I think that is, I think the pre-verbal trauma that the adoptee experiences is also lifelong.
You have the last 15 seconds, Adam. You want to add to that?
Yeah, even when I'm an adoptive dad, full disclosure.
I know that.
This is a complicated issue. It's always hard. It's always complicated. In the best of circumstances, and in the best of circumstances, adopted people have issues. It's fine, we all have issues. And birth parents have profound issues. And that's in the best of circumstances. That's not what we are setting up here.
Aimee and Adam, thank you so much for your thoughts. I really appreciate your time, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Over the last 2 years, the local Lunchbox program has been providing meals for kids across Massachusetts. Started in Chelsea in June of 2020 to address a food gap exacerbated by the early days of the pandemic. But it's since expanded big time, having served more than 5 million meals so far, gearing up to offer a lot more this summer. I'm not talking about the cold pizza and chocolate milk I got during my school days, at least I think it was pizza. Local Lunchbox has teamed up with nonprofits and local restaurants like Dorchester's Fresh Food Generation and Mexican food chain Boloco to provide culturally relevant meals to the kids they're going to. Their summer meals program just launched this week. Joined by Cassandra Campbell, she's Chief Executive Officer at Fresh Food Generation. Jill Shaw is President of the Shaw Family Foundation, one of the nonprofits involved. Jill, it's good to see you. Cassandra, great to meet you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
So Jill, starting with you, there's the Shaw Family Foundation, a couple of big nonprofits, additional nonprofits like the Y, and local wonderful restaurateurs like Cassandra. Can you give me the local Lunchbox for Dummies tutorial on how this actually works?
Super simple. Thanks, Jim. So the money comes from the U.S. government. It's part of the USDA school food program, and it's the summer feeding program. The Y acts as the agent that interacts with the government, so it processes all of the claims. And then all of these amazing restaurants, Cassandra's restaurant and others around the city and around the state and soon around the country, cook meals, delicious meals like they serve in the restaurants for kids. Kids walk in, they take meals, they get them for free, and the U.S. government pays for them.
And by the way, it's universal. A kid walks in, if he or she is a kid, meaning under 18, you're not like checking
Correct.
any, okay, great. And one more thing with you, Jill, your organization says the federal money has been underutilized so far. What's that mean?
Well, you think about it, Jim, there's about 500,000 kids in the state of Massachusetts that we feed all year long in school food. Summer meals, that number just plummets. It drops off because kids aren't in school every day, so they're harder to reach. We're trying to make it easy for kids to access food by partnering with restaurants that are right around the corner from them.
Okay, Cassandra, why are you part of this network? I'm sure you're a good soul who wants to do a good thing, but why did you decide to sign up?
I think that during the pandemic, we really had two important jobs. One was to keep everyone on our team employed. We have 20 employees who live in the neighborhood and walk to work. And the second was to make sure that we could feed people really good food. And we saw the lines for emergency food. We saw people in our neighborhood not have access to healthy, affordable cooked foods. And we wanted to be a part of that opportunity to provide free food.
Do you make money off this program? I mean, I don't mean, I'm making it sound like it's crass to make money. In addition to doing good things for the kids, are you making money?
Yes, we are making money, and that's a really important question. It's what allows us to pay our employees a living wage. And so it means a lot to us as a small business to be able to hand our neighbors a free meal and to be able to get paid for it. I think it's such a win-win solution.
Now, Cassandra, now it is nervous time. I'm going to eat a meal, provide, or at least taste it, provided by you, that I'm told is exactly what a kid would get. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm assuming these are collard greens. Is that what these are? Yes?
They are local collard greens.
Fabulous. Okay, and this is, whoops, hello, what is this thing?
That is a sweet plantain. We are a farm-to-plate Caribbean-American restaurant, and we include plantains on our plate because it's what is familiar and culturally relevant to folks in our community.
There's nothing like doing an interview with your mouth full, by the way. It's really very professional on my part. And the final thing that I'm not going to eat because I'll really embarrass myself, what is this large piece of what looks like protein? Is that what this is right here? What is that thing?
You are having the herbed chipotle chicken.
Oh, great.
And we do everything from scratch in our kitchen. From scratch means we get all the ingredients, we put it in a blender, we bake it onto the chicken. The chicken is from Joyce Family Farm, so it's antibiotic-free, hormone-free, really good for you, and it's over coconut rice.
The rice looks great. I'll try that later. There's salsa too. And finally, what am I drinking?
You are drinking milk, which is offered to all kids who come into the program. They're offered a meal and the option of getting a cup of milk.
Well, I hate milk, but I'm not going to hold that against you. I'm sure the kids need it and love it. So,
I'm dairy-free too, so.
So, Jill, locally sourced and healthy, I assume that, I know your background in the Boston public schools, that's real, right?
Yeah.
This stuff is all locally sourced?
It's all real. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing, right? We can feed kids this way, or we can feed them plastic wrap processed food. We choose this.
And how does a restaurant qualify? I think and correct me if I'm wrong if there's an update, there's 7 restaurants sort of in the Boston community that are participants so far. How does a restaurant qualify if they want to add themselves to that list?
They just, if they want to do it, they just give us a buzz, go to locallunchbox.org, and we can sign them up. I mean, this does help any restaurant generate more revenue. And there are community programs across the city too, Jim, that are serving meals via local lunchbox. So we served 5 million meals this way. That's last year. We expect that number to just grow exponentially.
Jill, I don't understand, and maybe I'm naive in light of Cassandra's answer to, yes, we're making money and helps our workers, et cetera, in addition to helping the community. Why would a restaurant, particularly coming out of a pandemic when so many independent restaurants are hanging by a thread, why would they not sign up? I mean, it sounds to me, maybe naively, that it's a win-win kind of deal, no?
It is a win-win. We modeled it after what Jose Andre was doing with restaurants across the country. And so you think about that, that's philanthropy, paying for meals that are cooked by restaurants to keep restaurants in business. We thought, okay, that's amazing. Why don't we just change where the money's coming from, and let's use the USDA dollars instead. Here's the big thing, Jim, right? We're a nonprofit, we're a Shaw Foundation, family foundation. So we're building this, but really it takes partners then to grow it and make sure that restaurants are aware that they can do it. But I can say I can't spoil the news, but there'll be a big announcement in a couple of weeks about another part of the country that's doing this as well.
Okay, spell it backwards so no one will know. What's the other part of the... Cassandra, before you go,
whisper it.
How do you get the word out to the community? How does a kid in your neighborhood know that they can come here and get what so far tastes like a fabulous and healthy meal? How do they do that?
So we received a whole bunch of flyers, and We haven't had any issue passing it out because neighbors have come in, taken the flyers and said, hey, my kid goes to this camp and it's down the street and I would love these flyers to pass it out. And today was our first day launching the program and we had a whole bunch of kids come in today. So I don't think we'll have a hard time getting out the word. I think it's a program that's very much needed and desired.
It's terrific. Congratulations to both of you. In a minute, after I say goodbye, we'll tell people how they can locate the places that are doing this distribution like Cassandria's place. Thanks so much. Good to talk to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Again, for more information on all of this, visit locallunchbox.org or shahfoundation.org. With roughly 1,400 miles of coastline, Massachusetts should be a beach lover's paradise. But as Chris Burrell from the GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting found, access to beaches here is deeply uneven, dependent on personal wealth, and often your home zip code.
Up and down the Massachusetts coastline, you can see how hard it can be just to get a day at the beach. Across the state, just 12% of beaches are open to all members of the public.
Our public beaches are magnificent in the state of Massachusetts, but they're available to just too few people.
Bradley Campbell heads the Conservation Law Foundation and says a big reason beach access is so unfair in Massachusetts are coastal towns that effectively exclude non-residents.
Reservation systems that are biased against non-residents, parking fees and beach sticker fees.
Massachusetts coastal and recreational agencies haven't acquired any new recreational beach properties since the late 1980s. What the state has done is invest millions of taxpayer dollars into seawalls and sand renourishment for town-owned beaches, many of which are entirely or mostly off-limits to the public that helped pay for those improvements.
If the general taxpayers of Massachusetts are investing in those areas, they shouldn't be excluded from them.
Grants for coastal resilience are supposed to be tied to public access. But Sunrise Beach in Marshfield is flanked by a seawall completed 7 years ago with at least $2 million in state grants. Non-residents can't park within a mile of the beach. GBH News found similar examples in Nahant, Chilmark, and Westport. But beaches that are open to all members of the public are facing other pressures that affect access. Valerie Gilman is president of City Council in Gloucester, where residents have preferential parking. But every summer, out-of-towners wait for hours in hopes of nabbing a space.
You spend 2 hours waiting in a queue and you get there and all of a sudden they put the sign up, residents only, no more non-residents. And
the impact of beach traffic on residents of this coastal city has been huge, says Gilman.
The traffic that was happening getting into the beach queue in the parking lot was just huge, to the point where residents that live here couldn't even get out to go downtown.
So the city just implemented an online system for non-residents to reserve and pay for beach parking. It's unclear if this policy will mean fewer people can access Gloucester's popular beaches. Just north at Crane Beach in Ipswich, you can see signs of another threat to access.
The beaches they're shrinking.
Tom O'Shea manages natural resources at the Trustees of Reservations, which owns the popular 4-mile-long beach. He says erosion from rising sea levels and more severe storms are eating away at beaches like Crane.
We've lost over 84 football fields of beach just in the last 30 to 50 years. So getting these bigger storms combined with more water and storm surge, and it's just eroding a lot of these beach dunes away.
A trend that will just accelerate, says O'Shea, just as beachgoers continue to scramble for a piece of sand where they can throw down a towel.
That story make you feel like your head's going to explode. Chris Burrell joins me now. Chris, thanks for doing that.
Hi, Jim.
Okay, so the 12% of beaches that have public access accessible to the public is obviously a fantasy. They're shrinking, as you just said at the end there, not to mention you can't get parking. Okay, I want to walk a mile from my parking space to the beach, walk onto the beach, lie down, throw a ball with my kid. Can I do that?
Well, it depends on what town you're in. I mean, largely it's going to be dependent on parking. I was on Nantasket Beach around Memorial Day. There was no parking left. I was told the parking lot filled up by 9 o'clock in the morning. It was a hot day. So, you know, the public beaches are really slammed with people on hot summer days.
Well, I don't just mean the parking thing. If I walk onto the beach from a distance, my understanding is these property owners in, you know, if on an additional beach, on a beach that's not one of these kinds of things, own to the low tide line. So realistically speaking, I can't do anything there anyway, can I?
That's right. In Massachusetts, state law says that private beach owners own all the way down to the low tide line, which means that intertidal zone between low and high tide is technically private beach unless you are fishing or hunting ducks or somehow navigating a boat to and fro.
I don't do that much duck hunting. And you have a great story about someone who actually braved one of those things and went on to a beach above the low tide line? I assume they're not treated well.
No, in fact, I was just on Nantucket interviewing a woman who's going to be in an upcoming radio and web story for GBH, who went beachcombing on Nantucket and encroached on a property that was posted with ropes and signs and stuff, and it turned into an alleged assault. She's an elderly woman. She's almost 80.
I don't understand one thing you said, though. It seems to me pretty obvious that if the state is giving money, there has to be a quid pro quo. My money goes to Gloucester or Ipswich, then I, who don't live in Gloucester or Ipswich, should be able to access the beach. You said it's supposed to be tied to coastal access. Either it is tied to coastal access or it isn't. Where's the disconnect?
Well, I think they're getting around it by the parking regulations because the beaches in the towns are quasi-public. It's just that you can't park near them. So it's kind of this, it's a loophole. It's happening not just in Massachusetts, but Connecticut is pretty notorious for the same types of practices in the very swanky shoreline towns.
And we only have a couple of seconds left, but my understanding, even though it's a long shot, about this low tide deal, and you can only duck hunt or whatever else you said a minute ago, fish, there are a couple of legislators from the Cape who are proposing that that low tide line be moved up to the high tide line. But even if it passes, there's going to be a lot of litigation around it, correct?
Yeah, the lawmakers from the Cape want to add the word recreation to allowable uses on private beaches right now. It's a long shot. There would be a lot of constitutional pushback because it would be tantamount to an eminent domain taking of land that's currently, private.
I'm preparing my friend of the court brief as we speak. Chris Burrell, great reporting as always. Great to see you.
Thanks, Jim.
That's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. A reminder to please join us for a special Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library tomorrow, Thursday. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu will be with us at 11 for Ask the Mayor. And then immediately following our show, stick around for Marjorie Egan, Callie Crossley, and Paris Alston as they host a community conversation about the Supreme Court abortion ruling. That's tomorrow, too, on GBH Radio 89.7 and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. For now, thanks for watching, and please don't forget Ukraine.